Hey everyone, welcome to the Play Reaction. I'm Corey Draper, and today I'm here to tell you all about the guarantee. This was a statement made by Joe Namath that some say changed the course of the NFL forever. So it shouldn't surprise you that I chose this as one of my first videos, as it was a pivotal moment in NFL history and one you should absolutely know about if you're learning the game of football. So let's get started. Back before the Super Bowl was about overhyped football, ridiculous commercials, and Janet Jackson's breast, it was a little-watched game between two organizations called the American Football League and the National Football League. The NFL was the dominant league, and the AFL was originally created to compete with the NFL. By 1965, the two leagues decided to merge and have an annual championship game that pit the best in the AFL against the best of the NFL. Now, I did a separate video that goes a little more in depth about the history of the NFL, so be sure to check that out if you want more context. The first two Super Bowls, then just known as the AFL-NFL Championship game, were underwhelming. The reason is because the NFL dominated the AFL on the field. The Green Bay Packers and their now infamous head coach Vince Lombardi obliterated their first two AFL opponents to a point where it was an uninteresting yawn fest. This caused the overall viewpoint that the AFL couldn't hold a candle to its counterpart. The NFL was literally and figuratively a whole other league compared to the AFL. They had the best teams and the best players, and it wasn't even close. So the Super Bowl back then was as if you had the New England Patriots of today play the Orlando Rage of the short-lived XFL. Or if you don't follow football, it was as if you had the Avengers take on Scooby and the gang. Both great in their respective fields, but come on. Of course, give Scooby and Shaggy their special Scooby snacks, and it may be a different fight. But they would never pass the mandatory drug test. So some feared the championship game was in trouble if staying afloat because of declining interest. Just like I avoid Taco Bell for the same reason, no one likes a blowout. And here comes Super Bowl III, which has the NFL champion Baltimore Colts with their straight-laced, tough-nosed, no-nonsense, in other words, boring football. This was all summed up by the attitude of their quarterback, Earl Morrall, who was once quoted as saying, "When you get the chance to do the job, you have to do the job, and that's all there is to it." Riveting stuff, Earl. His name even sounds boring. Earl Morrall. Earl Morrall. Earl Morrall. Earl Morrall. Earl Morrall. Their opponents in Super Bowl III, the AFL champion New York Jets. Now, this team could not be more opposite, both in attitude and play on the field, especially quarterback Joe Namath. Namath was this rebel party animal that loved to go big or go home, whether it was in football or in life. In fact, he earned the nickname Broadway Joe for his high-profile way of living. Off the field, Broadway Joe loved the nightlife. Throughout his career, he was spotted at parties and strip clubs, and it turns out he was constantly hungover at practice. On the field, Namath loved to just chuck the ball deep. He was the first QB in history to throw for 4,000 yards in a season. He also led the league in interceptions because, well, he wasn't afraid to take chances. He made dangerous decisions on the football field, and he made questionable decisions off it. He was the original bad boy of football. So basically, imagine if Johnny Manziel had the talent of Brett Favre. Or if you're not a football person, imagine if Charlie Sheen was a quarterback and had the football talent of that guy in There's Something About Mary. Despite how reckless Namath was, he still led the Jets to an 11-3 record in 1968, was named MVP of the AFL, and led the Jets to the big game. And boy was he cocky. So cocky that he talked down the big bad Baltimore Colts in the week leading up to Super Bowl III. Keep in mind that the Baltimore Colts weren't just good, they were historic. They beat their opponents that year by an average of 18 points. That's a big deal. That point differential is a record that still exists. It's been nearly 50 years and no one has topped it. The Colts were 22-point favorites to win over the Jets that week. They were the best team in the best league. Earl Morrall was the MVP of the NFL, and Namath said in an interview that he could name 5 AFL quarterbacks better than him. Whew, I believe the kids today would call that throwing shade. Players today wouldn't even tweet something like that. It's crazy. But that's still not the boldest thing Namath would say that week. In an awards banquet 3 days before the big game, some Colts fan starts heckling Namath while he's at the podium, and naturally, Broadway Joe points at him acts like he's selling suits in a TV commercial and says, "We're gonna win the game." I guarantee it. Now, if a player said this today, it would be an absolute circus. It would be tweeted out immediately, and there would be 24-hour coverage about it on ESPN as they bring in experts to break down every syllable in the quote and hold debates with Stephen A. Smith as to whether or not it was racist for some reason. But this is 1968. Only one reporter actually picked up on the quote and wrote about it. Soon, this tiny article in the Miami Herald picked up steam, and by game time, the whole country knew that Joe Namath, the quarterback of the New York Jets, the enormous underdogs, guaranteed they would take down Goliath. Now, the first AFL-NFL championship game drew big ratings because it was fresh off the merger and everyone's interest was piqued. The second, however, dropped significantly because it was apparent to everyone that the NFL was the superior league. And perhaps because of all the controversial things that Namath said, or maybe even because of his guarantee, ratings came back up for Super Bowl III. Love him or hate him, people wanted to see if Broadway Joe could put his money where his mouth was. And he did. The Jets baffled one of the greatest teams in NFL history and held the Colts to just 7 points. Baltimore even pulled out Morrill, their MVP quarterback, and put in eventual Hall of Famer Johnny Unitas, who was the original starter but missed the whole season because of an injury. But it wasn't enough. The Jets won Super Bowl III 16-7. Namath fulfilled his guarantee. David slayed Goliath. Scooby and his friends ripped off the mask, revealing that Earl Morrill was Old Man Jenkins, the custodian, the whole time. And he would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those meddling kids and their mangy quarterback. With this win, the New York Jets single-handedly legitimized the AFL, the merger, and the Super Bowl itself. And who was named Super Bowl III MVP? Broadway Joe. A lot of people hailed this moment as the single most important thing to happen to the NFL. Without the Jets winning, some say the Super Bowl would have never really been taken seriously. While that may be a stretch, the game and league grew in popularity after this game, and ratings steadily increased over the next few years and decades. One thing is for certain, had the Jets lost that game in embarrassing fashion like they were supposed to, Joe Namath likely wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, hailed as an NFL legend, and may have never been in the position to give his second most popular quote, the one where he was blasted and hit on Susie Colbert.
What does it mean to you now when the team is struggling?
I want to kiss you.
God bless you, Broadway Joe. Well, that wraps it up for today. If you want to see me cover any other NFL historical moment, be sure to comment below. Also, I'd love to hear from you. You can hit me up on Twitter and be sure to follow @ThePlayReaction on all the social medias. Also, remember to hit subscribe and that little bell icon so you'll know exactly when my next video is online. Thanks for watching.